Done.
I want to go back to reflections and reflecting. Now, I'm going to say something. Some of you maybe have gotten scores on your reflections that are less than desirable. And so what I'm going to tell you is, and some of my feedback on those were, dig a little deeper. Don't just summarize, go deeper. Ask yourself those questions. You can always go back and resubmit a reflection. And for lack of better words, more points. You know how I feel about points, but my feedback is intended to invite you to go deeper. And so what I just handed you is a paper that might encourage deeper reflection. When we can learn to ask ourselves questions, so why? I mean, if you get to a point where you can't ask any more questions, it's probably a pretty good place to be.
That's amazing.
Yeah, if you get there, tell me how to do that, because I don't know if I've quite gotten there. But I mean, and we talked about this before, but I'm gonna erase this. We talked about the difference. If you were to describe the difference between theoretical application and personal application, what would you say are the key components between theoretical and personal application? We talked about it briefly one of the first days. Bryce?
Personal application is when you're actually applying it. For example, it's easy to say, do something and it'll work out. But it's different to, okay, I got an example.
Okay.
Okay.
English or another language, it's fine.
Okay, all right. Start going on. With playing the guitar, you can watch someone on YouTube on how to play the guitar, and you can memorize the theoretical application of how to play the guitar. But until you actually get in the nitty-gritty and you actually practice the guitar and you keep messing up, it just sounds horrible. But you keep going at it, and that's the main difference to me between theoretical and personal application. You need the theoretical in order to apply it personally, I think. But it's just, yeah, that's the main thing.
Good. Anyone else? Theoretical versus personal?
I think you have, and this is a hard thing to do, especially for me, is I think there would be more I's in personal, but then on the other hand, I think, and that's the problem, is I don't want to put someone like, I feel this way or I do it this way, but then on the other hand, we're talking about ourselves anyways. It's kind of the context of like the stories and stuff like that. That makes sense.
Yeah. Let me maybe describe it a little bit differently using your example and the difference between the I. What if someone said, it's important to exercise? Okay, what kind of application would that be?
Theoretical.
Theoretical, yeah. We know that it's important to exercise. We know that it's important to eat well. But if I were to say, I know that it's important to exercise because as I've done this, is I've exercised 20 minutes a day. I've seen a change in my life, and this is how it's changed my life. And whenever I didn't exercise, I could notice these aspects of my life. My life was different in these ways. And when I started doing this, when I started exercising, I saw a complete change. And so you start talking about I, but you personalize it. And you say, and then you start comparing and contrasting of maybe when you didn't do something. And that which also illustrates the importance for you. And when I've seen my parents not exercise, they get cranky or whatever, or whenever you're taking the theoretical piece that we know as an important or true principle, and we apply it personally. And we start looking at certain conditions. Is it true under every condition, or are there certain circumstances when it's true for me and maybe not true? The why, the how, the under what circumstances. Dig deeper and then associate a personal experience. If you can put it into the context of your own life, either a current experience, a past experience, or even envision what it might look like. I think if I start doing this, I think this is going to happen. And this is why I think that. I know this about me, and so I think that if I do this, then this will probably happen. These are the positive things that could happen. These are the potential negative things that could happen. This is what I'm going to do to prevent those negative things from happening based on what I'm anticipating. That could change as I get into it and experience it. So we're trying to remember the mirror that I showed you. You know, you're standing in front of the two mirrors. We're able to see ourselves more clearly in the past, the present, and the future. We may not know exactly what that future looks like, but we might have a pretty good idea of what it might look like. And so let's talk about that. Reflect on that, or look forward. So, Rob, what would you say is the greatest thing that has helped you have a meaningful experience with a reflection?
One thing I always do is, I mean, it's a little bit different here, but just because the reflections have to be done so quickly. But in my past experience, I usually read the reflection, like read what the prompt is and things like that. And then I won't actually do my reflection until probably the next day, because I think through it. I analyze myself, and I do what he talks about. Is I think about it, I get all of the surface answers, and then I ask myself more questions to dive me deeper. And I continue to do that until I really have a deep reflection. And I really analyze what I'm doing and what I can change. And that makes it so when I write my reflection, or if I was to do it with a video, which I'm probably going to start doing next semester, but attaboy. But it'll let me really express what he wants, because he wants to see that you went through that process. It's not so much, I want you to answer these questions and that's that. That's a bunch of junk. He wants us to actually go through and deeply think and deeply reflect and get to those behaviors that we can then push up to actions and push up to our thoughts and feelings to go deeper. So to really think about it.
I appreciate that, and it's very difficult for me to put a quantitative value to reflection, but I can usually tell when someone has gone there. I mean, one good self-evaluation, one criteria you might use is, do I feel like I just went through a hoop, like I jumped through a hoop? And you know, did I have a meaningful experience where I really thought, well, I explored my thoughts and feelings and the subsequent actions? Do I have behaviors? I mean, I'm gonna pick on Kellen, because I just read one of his. Not pick on him, to applaud him. I could tell that he was personalizing. He was looking at thoughts and feelings and exploring, you know, things that he does, and maybe why it's good or not good. And it was very good. And you have to kind of make yourself vulnerable to a certain degree. But I promise you that some really insightful learning for you will happen. I'm not going to judge you, but I love to see that you're going through the process, because I don't know what all the emotions and thoughts that you're going through, but I can see that you're going through something. And as you go through that, I can guess that there's probably some good learning going on. I mean, in reference to Kellen, what has been your experience as you kind of explored those thoughts and feelings? I mean, and some of those things that you've recognized that are good or not good. What's been has it been a meaningful experience? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that for me, I read the prompt, and then almost immediately after reading the prompt and thinking back to class, I have an experience in my life where I feel like I portrayed, the wrong or the right actions, and so I just kind of talk about that experience and what I learned from that experience, what I could do better in that experience, things like that, and kind of see what can I do to make sure that if it's a negative thing, I don't do it again. So that's kind of where I go, is I just kind of reflect on my own life and my own experiences.
Awesome. And as a result of doing that, do you find that it's more meaningful? Or, talk about the outcome for you as you do that.
So just yesterday, when I submitted mine, I was typing it up, and then I stared at the sentence I just typed for a while, thought about it, and I was just like, man, I just really had a interesting moment just rereading that sentence. And then I went on to say, just reading that sentence, I had this experience.
Awesome.
And so it's just basically, for me, it was just describing how I feel, and it definitely helps me understand, because we all have weaknesses, we all have strengths, and it helps me understand my strengths and weaknesses better.
And that it really does, if we're willing to go there. And I love the fact that you articulated, wrote out, wow, I just read that sentence and I just had this experience. Again, you're exploring immediately those immediate thoughts and feelings and what you're learning from that. And that's where the learning happens. That's a beautiful moment. That's awesome. And you may not always have those moments, but the one thing you want to ask yourself, this is a great question to ask yourself, is there more? When you're in that moment and you have the light turn on, ask the question in your mind, is there more? Start thinking about more. Is there more? Is there more that, and let your mind go. Because there may be, that might have just been the initial piece. There may be even some more under that great nugget that you just uncovered. There may be more.